You're listening to Discovering Truth with Dan Duvall. Hey friends, Dan Duvall here to tell you about something I am super excited about. The Bride Tribe Advance 2023, which we are going to be calling Revolution. Take your place in the kingdom. This is going to happen at the Royal Sonesta in Houston, in the Galleria area from November 9th through the 12th. At booking.bridemovement.com, you will be able to register for this event, and it links right from bridemovement.com. I know I don't always give announcements on this podcast for what's going on in the bride ministries world, but this is just too important, friends. It is going to be extraordinary. Every year that we do this advance, it is a move of God. It is a move of God. Last year, we had 3 hours of nonstop testimony after the event with a line that was still going, and we just had to shut it down so we could tear down. It was because God moves at these advances, and we don't want those of you that are part of our podcast family to miss out because you just didn't get the news. Booking.bridemovement.com. You can sign up. You will be able to get your hotel room. You'll also be able to get some information about the event itself, meet our speakers. It's going to be me, Todd Edwards, and also 2 of my favorite people from the other side of the world, Todd and Rachel Weatherly. And we are going to be having an extraordinary time of family and fellowship, worship, and cutting edge revelation. So I want to invite you all, booking.bridemovement.com. Now, in addition to that, keep in mind, danduvall.com is the home of the Discovering Truth podcast. You can do a couple of things on that website. Number 1, you can access our podcasts. Number 2, you can purchase really cool merchandise like mugs and shirts, and we have the whole Names of God series. A lot of people that watch the church, they say, hey, where'd you get that really cool shirt with all the names of God? Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah Rapha, Jehovah Gabor. Like, where is that sold? danduvall.com, friends. And it comes in robes for the ladies and handbags and all that cool stuff. And you can know that you are supporting this podcast when you buy and look highly fashionable in your new gear. We also have the ability to become a podcast patron for as little as $5 a month. And that comes with benefits. You get early access to these podcasts and a few other goodies. And so the last piece of news, as many of you know, Overcomer Accelerated is our offering to those that want to accelerate their healing journey. You can join in 3 ways. 1, you can join just for the live components, which includes live ministry demonstration with yours truly on a weekly basis, as well as book study. Option number 2 includes over 100 hours of coursework online in addition to the live component. And the third way to join is with a coach. So you'll get the live ministry and the book study. You'll get over 100 hours of learning online, and you will also get 8 hours of personalized one-on-one coaching with a trained coach every month that you stay enrolled. And so overcomeraccelerated.com. Check out the offer. And with that said, we're going to jump right into the podcast on the other side. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Discovering Truth with Dan Duvall. Those were your announcements. All right, friends, we're back on Discovering Truth with Dan Duvall, and I am sitting down again with Kate. And we are picking up in the middle of a very hectic cliffhanger. Now, when we had left off, Kate and I were talking about how she was swapped in. And now the family that she grew up in, she calls them her foster family because that is how she represents the situation. And she told us in the last podcast that that there were pictures shown of her as a child, so she was supposed to believe, that looked radically different from her. And there was like a point at like 5 months or something in there where all of a sudden she just looked extremely different. And they said, oh yeah, you just, your hair changed color, and that was supposed to be the truth. But in her journey, she has learned some things. She has been taking a journey of healing with Bride Ministries, and we want to give her coach a shout out as well for all the wonderful work that she's been doing. And then we were also on the crossroads of pre-implantation time travel, the training, the different bodies they put you in, the initiations. I mean, there's so much there. Kate, welcome back to Discovering Truth.
Thank you. Excited to be back.
Kate, I want to ask you this. How do you keep all of this straight in your head?
I don't. When Jesus reveals stuff that you couldn't possibly make up, you just have to write it down. There's no other way around it.
Well, I am super curious, as are the rest of our listening audience, with our former cliffhanger. How did the process of putting you in your foster family take place?
We will get into that today. So, right before I start, I wanted to share something that the Lord spoke to me while we were going through this process of figuring out my true story, my true identity, all of these things. Because I'm sure that this is not uncommon. I'm sure there's other people who are either in this journey or about to walk into it, and your whole world is about to implode. And you're going to be like, what? This is not what I thought was my true life. So these are the words he spoke over me, and hopefully this is going to minister to someone else today. So this is what I received from him. I am a just God and a Savior. Look to me and be saved, all you ends of the earth, for I am God and there is no other. I am the one who shields you from the disaster that falls upon the nations. I have heard your cry to me for direction, and I now speak it. I will make your way clear and set the path before your feet. Through narrow ways you must follow to reach the end of the road. Your soul will bear heavy burdens not known to the common man. Your scars are deep, for you have known much. Your affliction has not been light, and you bear in your body the wounds of Christ. You stood up to Lucifer when he could have broken you, and you did not bow down. Though he twisted you and crowned you with thorns, you were defiant. You remember your essence from when you were with me before I knit you together in your mother's womb. You know my face, you know my name. You worshipped me when all the stars sang together and the sons of God shouted for joy. I have not forgotten you. I have called you by name, and you are mine. I am your Redeemer who calls you out of dust today and turns your mourning to joy. I will renew all things in you. So this is the promise that he gave to me when he started showing me what we're about to get into. So with that said, here we go. So this is kind of just a funny thing, but if anyone's ever been on the internet and you get asked to log in and you have to put a birthday in, Facebook is a prime example. I always picked a fake birthday, and I always picked the same date. I would always pick June 16th, 1980. For no apparent reason, I thought. My whole adult life I've done this. Well, turns out that was actually my real conception date when they created me as a CRISPR baby. And that's been obfuscated from me my whole life. So that was a funny start right then and there. My full self knew this detail, and that was brought forward, and the Holy Spirit confirmed that. So I was like, whoa, that's way too weird. But yeah, so that's a fun detail. And just to backpedal a little bit about what we talked about last time. So I was absolutely a CRISPR baby. And so what they were doing is they were gene editing me to become a super soldier like my dad. And my dad works my real dad works in the Black Ops military somewhere in Canada. I've never met him, don't know anything more than that, but that's who he was. And my parents never met, my real parents. They just chose them based on the fact that their heritage and their bloodlines lined up really well for their purposes. So they really liked the qualities that were there for my Jewish heritage. And I'll just put an asterisk in here.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea until this year that I'm Jewish. Not a clue. In fact, and we'll get to this later, I've been programmed to believe I was from an entirely different ethnicity, bloodline, family story, the whole 9 yards. So
can I just ask this question?
Yeah.
If I were to look at a family photo of you and your foster parents, as you call them,
yeah,
would I be able to see there is no way you guys are related? Like you don't have the same eyes, the same, or do you have some similar features? I'm curious.
Yeah, this is a really good question. So, because I really looked at this hard.
Yes.
When I was starting to figure this out, and I pulled up the pictures, and I was looking and looking, and I was comparing pictures of not just like what I would consider my nuclear family, so my supposed mom, dad, and brother, but also myself with my supposed cousins, because the one side of the family, so that my fake mom side, they have a very, very strong facial structure. Like everyone has the same jawline, everyone has the same nose, even the kids, there's 14 children in that family. So even their kids, who obviously are married to other people, they're like my cousins carry that look. It's the McNee look. Everyone knows it. But when you look at me beside my cousins, I don't fit at all. I stick out like this kid that just appeared. I was the family friend, right?
Okay.
But in my nuclear family, at first glance, I look like I fit. It's pretty close. They did a really good job choosing who I was placed with. But if you look closer, then you can start seeing it doesn't really align. It doesn't add up. Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. So that was really fun to start looking at. And I kept all those pictures as evidence. It's too good. It's just way too good.
So they programmed you to believe a whole different lineage, but you actually have
I'm Jewish.
Jewish.
Yeah.
Okay. Genetically.
Yeah.
I assume that has something to do with the whole story.
Yes. It's huge. It has almost every implication on my entire life. Yeah, it's massive. So, while they're doing this CRISPR tech gene editing stuff with me, they realized that they could actually do more with me because as a super soldier, so I know Alex Valero, he kind of had like very physical qualities. He was like super fast and super strong. With me, I was different. So I didn't have like necessarily like super physical strength, but I had crazy endurance, insane work ethic. Like I've always been able to outwork everyone around me. You can ask my husband, I like never quit. I would work through like 16, 18-hour day, not eat, not go to the bathroom, just power through work like a crazy man. And I've always been able to do that and just keep going. Like it didn't affect me. And the thing I always got told growing up is, oh, you're super smart. You're so smart. You know all this stuff. Everyone always has said that about me my whole life. And I guess in a sense, yeah, they were right, because I could always like listen to someone who was telling a story and I already knew the punchline before they even got there. Or in school, someone would be teaching a theory or trying to explain something and I was bored already. I was like, okay, like, can we go deeper? And so that's always been a trait, and it's actually always been something that I've been bullied for and manipulated for. And there's like a long line of certain people who showed up in my life at different periods And all of them would try to use my gifting and ability for their own nefarious purposes in game. They never wanted anything to do with who I really was. It was all about them knowing and being attracted to what I had that I couldn't see. And they obviously being programmed in the dark ways, were going to use that to advance their own purposes. So that was something that really has always stood out. But I always took it for granted. I was like, well, of course, like, doesn't everyone study hard? Doesn't everyone think hard? Like, it just seems like a way to be. But it's not. That's not normal. And I didn't realize any of this until I was working with Valerie. And because this year was just so much happening, I was like, okay, like, we just need to like get this stuff out of me. Let's get this programming out. Like, and I was booking like her 2-hour sessions, which like in my mind was like way too short. I'm like, I need like a week, like start to finish. Like, let's just go. And I kept asking her, like, how much more time can I get? And she'd be like, you really reminding me of Alex. Like, you got super soldier ability. Just wham, let's hit me with the book. And
it is. The problem is, right, you start digging the stuff out and you realize
yeah,
you could keep going.
yeah, like I have the endurance
dig, the more you dig.
Yeah, I'm like, I can handle like all the effects of processing this much information and this much trauma and this much stress, right? Which is just totally not normal. I'm not like that anymore. Happy to report that my super soldier programming ended a couple months ago.
Come on.
Like, drastically.
Wow.
I had a session with her, and then the next day I was like, oh my gosh, like, I can't do anything. So I slowed down drastically.
I do want to make a comment on that.
Sure.
Like, this is true. Like, when the deprogramming starts to change things and the emergence of actual humanity like overtakes people, there are some seemingly beneficial aspects of being programmed that do drop off. I mean, that's true, right? You are nailing it. It happens. Real changes. Wow.
It took me a couple of weeks to kind of settle in and be like, oh, so this is what it means to be human. Okay. All right, Jesus, this is your plan. Wow. Thought I was highly productive before this, but anyway.
So all right, so you made real progress. Now are we going to learn how they swapped you into your family? You're going to explain to us the Jewish connection.
Yeah, I'm going there. It's very like, there's so much packed into me being swapped out. I have to kind of bring all this to the forefront. So they so they were able to program me there. And so this is very key to why I got placed and not taken out when I backed down in my initiation ceremony. So they changed their work from intending me to be a super soldier, just that. And they decided that what they could do was create me to be a high-level spy this is their operation, called Operation Armageddon. And so this is Satan's plan to destroy all of the true Jews who believe in Jesus in the coming days. So fast forward. So I was supposed to act like the Gestapo against my own people without knowing that I was actually Jewish. And so they used the placement family, my foster family, to their advantage to keep this mission intact, even though I had gone and kind of blown up their original plan. So what they had initially intended for me was to actually enter the Skull and Bones, which I've learned is supposedly only for males, but for whatever reason, I was like an exception to that rule. And I was supposed to enter it the day of my initiation, but I never did. George W. Bush is also part of the Skull and Bones. So this is why I was kind of placed under him, and he had jurisdiction over where I went, and was able to make that decision. And then this is the other piece of it. So they not only programmed me to be able to be that high level spy, but this is also what they did. So because I was training in all this pre-birth, I achieved a very high ranking in Satan's army. So I was at the second highest level, second only to what would be called like the gods and the goddesses that we think of, like Baal and Moloch and Isis and Diana and all these big guys. And so the title that they had given me was Isis of the Two Towers. And I was actually supposed to bridge the gap between Babel as it was and Babel as it will be under Satan in the New World Order. So I was supposed to command the troops that would get this project done and make it a reality. And then they selected me to be essentially the military genius of their new Babylon. So this is why I was talking about the really like smart, really strategic, able to really think and like figure stuff out really fast. This is what they were using me for. So, but at my initiation ceremony, when I was supposed to step into this role, I went rogue, and I wasn't supposed to do that. So the girl who was trained behind me, she wasn't at my level. She was a step down. She's actually the one who's now in my spot. I don't know who it is yet, but she's the one who then, we'll get into this later, she sent the agent to kill me. And that agent was the one who introduced me to Bride Ministries. So I just for fun, I had to ask Jesus, like, how big is the target on my back? Because this is insane. And he said, it's really, really big. But I've outsmarted them because I'm covered in the blood of Jesus and they can't touch me. And I do this every single day. And every single day they get really mad. So with all that said,
I love it.
This is what happened. So after they ran me through Montauk and wiped my mind, beat me up, traumatized the heck out of me, got all the stuff that they felt I needed to experience into my system. They picked, I'm going to call them the Brazos, so Jeff and Linda Brazo, and they were chosen by George W. Bush because they were what he considered an inconspicuous family. And he didn't want me to be like front and center or anything, out there where I'd be noticed. So they were perfect. They fit his credentials. And they took me as a baby. So around, it's somewhere between the 5 to 7 month range is when they took me through the underground tunnel system from Montauk. It runs all the way over to central United States. It does run up and down the eastern seaboard quite a bit. They took me over to central US and then up into Alberta, Canada, for those of you who are listening. And that tunnel, I'll just make a note because this also plays into my story down the road, but that tunnel actually runs all the way to the capital of our province. And it's very, very critical. And ironically, the main highway in our province runs right over top of it, and nobody has a clue that what's happening underneath their feet. So that's how they got me here. And so I was always told that I was born in Olds, Alberta on September day in 93. And I was told which room I was born in and color and all this stuff. However, this is what really happened. So Jeff and Linda had, Jeff comes out of a very long history of Freemason families. His grandfather was a 33rd degree Freemason of the Scottish Rite, who's also involved in the Shriners. His grandmother and his mother were part of the it's gonna bug me what the name is. Eastern Star, something like that. Yeah. Ironically, his grandfather was also connected to the Alberta Liquor Board, and these people drank and partied, and like this is I knew these things as a kid growing up. I was told this, so I've always known this. Didn't really know what it meant, but I knew this. And then once I started researching, I was like, oh my goodness, this is what's going on. So there's your Freemason side there. And then so Linda Brazo, I was always told that she grew up in a Christian family and had like Catholic and Orthodox background, that her family was Ukrainian, and they were all peasants and farmers and homesteaders over in Saskatchewan, Canada. Turns out she was actually one of 14 children who were all super soldiers. And she married into this Freemason family with Jeff as part of her operations. And so they kind of fit the ranking for taking someone like me under their wing. So what happened, as far as I have the information and the memories, and I'm sure more will come out over time, but I have enough to say that taking me as their child was a type of opportunity to step up in the ranks, because like, okay, let's just take this into perspective. You're like, you're lower down, like you're not really operating in the high ranks of the Illuminati beast system plan. And then you have George W. Bush send a messenger to you, and he was like, hey, we need a foster family for this girl. They told them that I was a CRISPR baby. They knew I was a super soldier. They knew enough, not all of the story, but they knew enough to know that like taking me into their family was massively important. And if they did it right, they were being promised lots of advancement, money, notoriety, all the things that happen within these levels. Obviously, some of that is lies, some of that is bribes, some of it doesn't happen, a lot of it does. And I can vouch for the fact that today they're incredibly wealthy and doing very, very well. And have always been in positions of leadership or influence, whether if they wanted it or not. They've had the opportunity at least to take it. So this choice paid off really well for them in the physical world. So, however, there was a cost. And anyone who studied the different levels of Freemasonry will be aware that at a certain point, you are required to make a sacrifice. Usually that sacrifice is of a family member, although now there also seems to be the acceptance of changing your gender, as we've seen with the Kardashians, that whole story. And you're considered a living sacrifice, but that is still a type of death, obviously. So in my case, they required a death sacrifice. So Jeff and Linda had a baby girl, and her name was Kate, my name that I have now. She was the one that was born in September in this hospital in Olds, and she is the one with black hair in the pictures that I have. So at about that 5 to 7 month range, I wouldn't be surprised if it was 6 months, because they love using symbolic numbers.
Oh gosh.
This is what happened. This is when they brought me up and switched me up. So same as yesterday, trigger warning to anyone listening, because this is going to get really gross. Not to be gross, but because it's gross. So oh boy, let me just grab my notes quick. Basically what happened is they took me down. So there was Jeff, Linda, and then the two what were called my grandparents, but they were Jeff's parents. So Al Alfred and Phyllis Brazo were present. There was also Jeff's grandmother, so Dorothy Johnson, was also present. And there was an Illuminati Grandmaster, hooded and cloaked. I never saw his face, but he was there to do the ceremony. And so what they did is they're in an underground kind of like a cavern. There was a stone altar in the middle. I'm a baby, like roughly the same age at this ceremony, being forced to watch what's about to happen. And so what they did is they took Jeff and Linda's actual daughter, Kate. They sexually abused her and ritually sacrificed her by decapitation on this stone altar. And then this grandmaster, as that was happening, he was like calling in these very dark spirits. And they came in as this baby was dying, settled on everyone that was there, including me. And Baphomet was the one who came in and led them. So I've been tied to Baphomet for my entire life. Wasn't until this year that I got free, because that sucker was like linked right in there. So the grandmaster marked my face with the baby's blood in an inverted cross. This is a spit in the face of Jesus Christ. Same on my genitals. Then he sexually assaulted me with his finger. They create pleasure. It's a trauma bond. And then they take this and they go forward with other types of rituals and further trauma as you progress in your age. So, and the reason I'm saying this stuff is because as a child later on, I was raised to believe that I had never been sexually abused, ever. That this was something that happened in other families, and that I was the lucky one. I had never, been exposed to the rougher things in life, as my fake dad, Jeff, used to tell me. And even to the point that I was about 16 when he said, I was pushing back on something that he wanted me to do, and I didn't feel comfortable. And he's like, well, you're lucky that I don't come into your room and rape you every night. And that just stuck in my head like a big red flag. My deep inner self knew something was up with this dude. There's a reason I never liked him, but I didn't know why. I couldn't figure it out. Because I felt okay, but I also felt dirty, super dirty all the time. And this was also used, so this ritual right here was used as a foundation to underlay the religious programming that would follow. It's very foundational, disgusting, but it works very effectively. So this is why they did it. And I share this because there is probably other people out there who are in that same place being like, well, my dad was okay, or like, like nothing, I don't remember anything really happening. But so take that information and hopefully that can help someone out there. So then they cursed me with hieroglyphs. And I actually saw these hieroglyphs later in my 20s when I went to a Reiki practitioner. Don't recommend doing that, but I was very lost and broken and trying to find answers. And she claimed that she only worked in the light. But
isn't that convenient?
It is so convenient. Ironically, Jesus never let me go back to her, thank goodness. But yeah, so I saw the hieroglyphs, and then there were tons and tons of Jewish stars, the 6 point. And so I want to make a distinction here between the satanic version of the Jewish star. There is absolutely that, and that's what came into the room and came over me. But there is also there's God's original Jewish star, and that's something that I've discovered since, and that is pure and clean, and Satan just copied it and used it for his own purposes. So they've stuck that one on me and had a good time with it. they opened a portal. They brought in all kinds of hexes, curses, more hieroglyphs. And one of the curses that they put on me was that I would have no children, no lands, no happiness, no peace, and a bunch of other things, and that I would serve Satan and Antichrist. And then they sealed that curse on a scroll with the blood of the baby. And there was a pyramid with a 33 in the corner of that scroll. So, of course, go into the meaning of all of that. And so what Jesus made known to me was that scroll signified the fact that I had been sold into the highest levels of Freemasonry.
Now, this is all happening when you're like 6 months old.
Yeah. And I had to watch the whole thing. Yeah.
And then you're recovering this in session work, and it's just play by play. Was this a highly emotional session as you were working through this memory, or was it just watching the data and having to process the emotions later?
So this one, he actually revealed to me outside of session work. I think it was right after my first meeting with Valerie, actually. Because Jesus went right to the core of, first he shut down my persecutors, and then he said, all right, you need to know who you are. And this is what he did. And I alluded to this yesterday, but I'll say it again. Obviously, this is super raw. Like in any normal person, myself included, would be sitting here bawling my eyes out, right? The reason I can say it with a smile on my face and actually like go into it is because of the level of healing that I have experienced. And so to answer your question, when he revealed this to me, yes, it was very emotional, but it was also one of the most like reassuring and what's the word? When you acknowledge someone,
yes,
and the feelings that they've had, and they feel like they're whole and they're heard, they're not crazy.
yes,
That's what I felt. I was like, I knew it. I knew there wasn't something, there was something wrong. And that's what he gave me. And I was just like, that's it. That explains so much. And so that's kind of what it was. And it took me a few days to process, because I was like, I'd always had this anger inside against Jeff and Linda, but I like couldn't figure out why. Like more than just against them for lying and manipulating and being abusive to my brother and stuff like that. This really did it. I was like, okay, all right, got it now. Like, I can understand why I would like to see you dead. Makes sense.
So
And then
Scroll had the pyramid, 33 on it. That was put you in the highest levels of Freemasonry, but you're 6 months old. Continue.
Yeah. So, and this is the other piece of that vision that Jesus also finished with. So, of course, I've always been like, I'm a very tender, sensitive person, and that's always been used against me. That's how God designed me. But all the Satanists took that to their advantage. And so that's been used to traumatize and program me my entire life. So I really I can't even handle the thought of a child suffering. And for a long time, until I understood the greater historicity of the Old Testament, I couldn't handle why God was like, go in and kill all the men, women, and children. I didn't understand what was going on. I was like, why? Well, they're all Nephilim hybrids, so they're not human. That's why. But so in this case, like seeing this trauma come forward, the part of my soul that by this point had been silenced to no longer even ask, no longer even try to plead for mercy, was kind of sitting in the corner like, is there any kind of good side to this? And Jesus says, don't worry, that baby, Kate, the real one, she's with him. I saw her. She's doing great. And we actually brought that grandmaster to justice. And he's been absolutely wiped out by living water. And the curse that he put on me, that one with the scroll, that's been all washed and broken off me. And it's done. Like he's been dealt with. So he gave me a pile of justice at the same time, showed me the stuff, dealt with it. So that was awesome. Yeah. So then fast forward, I'm now the new Kate in this family. And this is how sick Freemasons are. So ironically, before I moved out and kind of like cut contact with my family, somehow Linda managed to give me my old baby books, which, you know, a lot of moms would write down all your memories and this and that. And I didn't really care about that stuff, but somehow it has always managed to stay with me no matter what has kind of been going on. I've always had it stuffed in a corner. And this year, after this stuff started coming through, I went back and I actually opened up those books and I read them for the first time. And when I read them, scales fell off my eyes. So Freemasons always have to tell you what they're doing. And sure enough, in Linda's own handwriting, I have the evidence that I was continually raped as a baby. So she recorded that I had 2 UTIs right around that age of 7 to 10 months. And if you studied UTIs and children and infants and signs of sexual abuse, you will know that little children, little babies do not get UTIs if they're being properly cared for by a loving and responsible adult. It just doesn't happen. Or if it does, it's like 1 in a million. Like it's super, super rare. And it is also one of the clinical signs of sexual assault. So here I have 2 of those recordings in less than a 5-month period. And she's written it all down. She's also written down all my vaccinations when I started getting eczema, which is another trauma expression of the body. And she's written down who I spent time with as a young baby. So I'd spent time with only the Freemasons in the family at all of my key juncture points, birthdays, Christmas, Easter, only these people. So right there, I was like, wow, okay, this is really starting to put things together. This explains why I have no memory of this stuff, because when you do it that young, your brain just can't handle it. It shatters everything. Third eye opens, and the Holy Spirit, he also confirmed to me, and he gave me the memory back. I was sodomized by both Jeffrey Warwick Brazo and Elaine Ruby Miller, my so-called aunt, who was chasing me this year to my car as I'm trying to get away from her. And this is why I called her a pedophile, because everything in my being knew the truth. She is, and she continues to be a pedophile. And she is currently acting in these ways with her so-called nieces. And this is how sick they are. They used dogs to sodomize me. As a 4-year-old girl, I remember living on an acreage. Ironically, the lady who owned the place that we were renting from was a JW. And I was outside in the barnyard, just, playing as a kid. And this lady's son had these big dogs, and they got off their chain. And I just remember hearing the dog coming. And I just flipped out, like total terror, like peed my pants, running as fast as I could through the tall grass back to the house, trying to get away from this dog. I've never forgotten this memory. But when I was listening to another survivor, I believe she was in one of the European castles. Can't remember which one, but she was describing these rituals that the elites do, where they strip the children naked, they make them run through the forest, and they chase them with the dogs to either kill them or conduct bestiality. Mm-hmm. This is what happened to me as a little child. And this is why I was terrified of that dog. I wanted nothing to do with it. So yeah, and then they also did lollipop programming on me. So that's where you just and this is also written in the baby book, that I was asking to go to the store to get lollipops. Which is, this really explains why they would have been able to drug me and do this stuff, because I was able to handle the toxicity. And then the other piece of it is that, and this is very interesting. So Jeff Brazo was sodomized. He could see in the spirit, but Linda was not, and she was always. And then obviously I was, so I could see in the spirit as well, and had my third eye open. And she was always jealous of me that I could, and that was a key of contention, which I didn't realize as I was growing up. She was always very jealous of my abilities, and wanted that for herself, but couldn't get it. So that is the toddler years, in short. And so what really happened is they sexually programmed the heck out of me. That correlated with the kitten programming that Ghislaine Maxwell did on me. And it laid the foundation for all the religious programming that was about to follow. Not to mention that when you do this stuff, you can invite in all kinds of spirits, mind control. You've absolutely wrecked this kid to the point that you can basically do whatever you want to them. So, and then the other piece of this is that I've already had at least 13 years behind me with programming up the wazoo. Like when Valerie and I are doing these prayers, like Dan's done an amazing job of consolidating all the mind programming, the evil grids, the constellations, the bloodlines, all of these lists of things that we've been placed under to lock us down, serve Satan. And very quickly it became apparent that I basically have to do every single list, plus all of the other new things that the Holy Spirit reveals happen to me, because they jammed almost every single thing into me. I don't know how I still am alive, but like these guys are disgusting. So
Wow.
it's just a testament to the saving grace of Jesus Christ that he does not abandon us to their whims and the evil that they purpose in us. Like, I should have been the most diabolical person on this planet if Satan had gotten his way. And Jesus said no.
That's and here's the thing. As you're going through the, just all the pieces of the story, I mean, as extraordinary as the story is, you're not the only CRISPR baby.
No, there's
you're
more.
Not right. I mean, you're not the only one that was part of the Epstein network that was put in contact with the Bushes, or that was under the jurisdiction of the deep state and the Illuminati. Is a massive international ring of evil people backed by ancient powers, and with many branches of influence. And so the size of the network, the amount of technology they're sitting on, the expansiveness of their underground and off-planet networks, and when you try to think about what it takes to straighten things out, one of the things the Bible says is, when you pray, say, "My Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." It's like, okay, so we need to reconcile earth to heaven. Mm-hmm. What that means in this generation is correcting for everything you're talking about. I mean, these prayers, they have to address the pre-implantation bondage. the disorder that the time travel has put on the creation using the soul of conceived, engineered children that have not yet been given like physical bodies on Earth's side. And I mean, it's so expansive. Anyway, I'm really enjoying. You're doing such a great job. Please continue.
Yeah, no, and I fully agree. Like, and as we'll get into
But
it
this is the
further,
thing. And then they put the religious programming on you. They put you in a church, and I'm probably trying to get my podcast into the hand of that pastor. Like, please listen to what is actually going on, so you can be used by Jesus to help somebody. It's tough. This is a tough situation.
yeah, yeah. And what you're saying about how all of this also affects the creation is absolutely true. Because as we get into this, we're going to see how physical location really matters. It's huge. This is being contested in our individual lives to grant or cede Satan territory and control and dominion. So yes, absolutely. And this is the truth that is being hidden from us. Well, I mean, you're exposing it, so it's great, but we need more people to wake up.
Come on.
So so that was essentially what happened in my toddler years. This is kind of why I had no recollection of it, because they seem to have stopped the sexual trauma and abuse somewhere in that 2 to 3 year old range, so that I wouldn't have any like kind of like a bleed through or a functional memory, an ability to speak to it and say, if someone did something to me. They're very, very sneaky like that. They try to cover their tracks. It's disgusting and vile, but that's kind of what they did. And then they switched over into religious programming. So I remember being it was roughly around the age that I could start to read and write is when I remember, I was about 5 years old. I remember Linda reading the Bible to us every night. That was, standard practice. And this, what I'm about to share is going to sound like it's the right thing to do. And in the right circumstance, absolutely. However, how it's being done and who's doing it really, really matters. So she would read the Bible to us as kids every single night. We started to do scripture memory. And this also plays a large part into my being like very, very smart. I have an insane memory. I can remember stuff that nobody would think that I could remember, even to this day. And because of that, I was able to memorize massive portions of the Word of God, which God has used to save me. However, that's not the reason that they wanted me to memorize it. So as I was saying earlier, they wanted me to be a high-level spy and be able to infiltrate church groups and rat people out. But I could fit in because I can quote the scriptures. I was catechized in all of the main catechisms, Heidelberg, Westminster, the New Westminster, and a couple other ones. So I could go through all of that. I remember listening to all of the big preachers that were on the radio since I was very small. And I knew exactly what they were talking about. Again, like just this, my super soldier ability to really process these ridiculously high level concepts of justification by faith and the 7 points of Calvinism and transubstantiation and all of these crazy theological topics that people spend their entire lives arguing about and going into the minor details of. This is what was taught to me through my childhood. And that's on the face value, that's a very good thing. I'm glad that I have that still to this day, because it has enabled me now to tell the difference between truth and error, false teaching and sound doctrine. That is absolutely essential. And not enough people are schooled in what they believe. They don't actually have a clue what they stand on. They don't know the Bible. They've never read it. They've never done the research, the outside research, to see if what they believe is actually legitimate. I've done that since I was a very small child. And so that has enabled me to never fully count God out, even though I tried it many, many times. And but the point of me learning all of this was not so that I would know Jesus at all. It was taught to me so that I would be able to go into a church and pretend that I was a Christian, but actually fulfill all kinds of agendas and little errands and cause trouble and do whatever I was being handled to do. And meanwhile, being able to speak very fluently and sound like I was totally, this upright Christian. So, funny enough, when I was 5, though, I remember having this encounter with Jesus one night, because Linda had just read the gospel story and the crucifixion and the resurrection account. And I remember what was left of my spirit at the time, because they weren't totally able to take out my core. They fractured all my parts, put them in bondage, sold them out, traumatized them, all that stuff, but they could never take out my core when they were trying to shatter me. They took my essence, but not my core being. So that little piece of me was still able to connect with the truth of the gospel and who Jesus really was. And I'll never forget it. I had this moment where I was just like, I believe you, Jesus, and I want you to be my savior forever. Like, I confess my sin. I believe that you are the Christ. I believe that you are risen from the dead. Like, here's my life. Like, I want to follow you. And he accepted that as a little 5-year-old. And I was so excited that I got out of bed and I ran down the hall and I was like, Mom, I just accepted Jesus to be my savior. She turns around, blank expression on her face, go to bed. That was her reaction.
Wow.
And I just remember like being so confused. Like, isn't this like what you want of me? Like, isn't that why you're reading me the scriptures? Isn't that the point? Like, you should, I was like, wouldn't you be like ecstatic? Like, you're a Christian. I want to be just like you. Like, I'm here, I'm in. Like, nothing. She never spoke of that moment again. Nothing. She never acknowledged that I had accepted Jesus into my life ever. Wow. For the rest of my life. Ever.
My gosh.
And that right there was fully demonic. I wasn't supposed to do that. They had failed in their programming again to shut all the doors to faith. And that was a big mess up on her part. So I became very confused from that point, though, because that seeded so much doubt. And that was the point. They immediately counteract any movement forward, any questioning, any attempt to look at both sides of the story. And so that was very foundational. And for the rest of my childhood, I always would look back on that moment and I'd be like, did I really accept Jesus? Like, I don't know, like maybe it didn't, maybe I'm not saved. And this all played very strongly into the theology that I was then taught, which I would now classify as pseudo-Christianity. It's not what the true scriptures teach at all. It's not who Jesus really is. But this is pushed by all the major denominations, particularly in the Baptist churches. And it's now it's known as the Reformed Baptist or the Reformed movement, Reformed Protestant movement. I know you're in the States, you're in Texas, and down there's the big Southern Baptist Convention, and there's all the big names. I'm going to name 4 of them. These are all people that I was programmed with the child trafficking and the they're all Freemasons, and I was traumatized with these people before I came Earthside, and these are not people that are being called out, but the Holy Spirit revealed all of them to me, and makes sense why I was both taught their theology, and also taught to like essentially idolize them as the teachers, the prominent guys within the Protestant church. So they are Albert Mohler, John Piper, Ligon Duncan, and R.C. Sproul. I'm also going to call out the fact that Stephen Furtick, Hillsong, and Elevation are all Freemason organizations. John MacArthur is not who people think he is, and Matt Chandler serves the Synagogue of Satan. But these are all people that I was very heavily taught and influenced by from a young age. My Jeff and Linda were like, they worship John MacArthur. It was like that would, if you didn't agree with him, like you were out of Christianity. So within this theological framework, which I'm going to go into, and you actually talk quite a bit about this in your sermons, but I wanted to highlight it because I don't know if it's fully fleshed out yet. So I want to bring it out some more so that maybe some other people who've grown up in this tradition can see it. I grew up in Bible Belt, Canada. Like, mm-hmm. You go to church, like everyone's a Christian, everyone votes conservative. It's, you do not question these things, these teachers, everything I just said is absolutely inflammatory where I am. So in this reformed system of thinking, and I'm going to call it false teaching because that's what it is. It is absolutely this idea that you, unless you have an E stamped on your butt, E for elect, you cannot know God, and you will not know God, and you're a dirty lowdown sinner who deserves to be dead. You didn't even deserve to be created in the first place, and you're going to hell. Now, we're absolutely sinners because of Adam's fall and because of our own choices. But we are also sons of God that he has set out to redeem. And to all who will call upon the name of the Lord, they will be saved. And Jesus' mercy is very, very great. He is not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. However, to those who will not receive him, they will not receive the right to become children of God, but only those who believe in his name. So right there, we start to see twisting of where the truth is. And it was beaten into me that there was absolutely nothing that I could do, nothing about me that was good. I was like the bottom of the scumbag. And even if I repented of my sin over and over and over again, that was still not enough. I had to just hope and pray that Jesus was going to have mercy on me on Judgment Day, because if he didn't, I'm out of luck. And even if he does save me in this lifetime, I can never truly know if I'm saved. I always have to hope that I got chosen and I was elect, and that I've, followed close enough to the expectations to have fruit, to be considered a Christian. And the other piece of it is that there is a very convoluted teaching around what it means to have the righteousness of Christ, what it means to be justified by faith, and what it means to be sanctified, and walking in fruits of righteousness. There's absolutely no teaching about the Holy Spirit, the gifts of the church, They just skip right over the book of Acts and the book of James as if they don't even exist in the Bible. Because if they actually preach those books, the church would look radically different than it does, and it would expose all of the false teachers that are prevalent inside of it. So, and the other piece of it, yeah, go ahead.
No, you're on just finish.
Sure.
Please.
The other piece of it is that the Old Testament. So I was mentioning how earlier I used to read the Old Testament and not understand like who the Canaanites were and why God was bringing judgment down on them. This is the reason why. So Freemasonry has so influenced the church and the historical narrative that is allowed to be brought out within Christian circles that actual factual archaeological and historical and personal eyewitness testimony dating back to as far as we can go is not allowed to be brought forward to bring to light what the text actually means. And the original Hebrew text of Genesis in particular is not ever spoken about. Because if it was, this is the Hebrew text that you break down like word for word in the original text to delineate the difference between Kabbalah and what the Bible says.
Right. Because in Genesis 1:1 in Kabbalah, they invent this Adam Cademan Bina Chokmah creation of Elohim, who is the created, not the creator. And then, heaven and earth, and like Jesus gets eliminated. Whereas Genesis 1:1 is John 1:1-4. Like it is literally Jesus being the one through which all of creation is happening as the Aleph Tav. Yeah. Okay. So just for the audience's reference point, I know what you're talking about. Go ahead.
So that right there, that is not, you cannot talk about that. That is never taught. They use their special Greek translation, which is, if you look into how the translations were created, a lot of that has been subverted by the Illuminati to intentionally create versions of the Bible that are incorrect and that are creating its own new sub-religion, which is leading us into the beast system. We are literally currently watching this happen. So this is what I grew up in, never having correct doctrine, never actually having revealed to me what the Bible really says, and therefore never able to actually come to a full knowledge of the truth. It's all blanketed and hidden. And on top of that, so not only do they lose you in the crazy theology, but they and just omitting stuff, but then they use it to blackmail you. So in these conservative churches, I grew up, I traveled around. We went to several denominations. I've seen all versions of the evangelical church, Mennonites, Lutherans, Presbyterians, Reformed churches. And we kind of settled in the Baptist church. And the reason for this is huge. So there's this hierarchy of the way that you will act. And it's really a reflection. It's the religious reflection of what's going on the backside of these churches in the Freemason hierarchy. So on the religious side, to the average person walking in the door, they'll never really put this together, but it's all works righteousness. You go to church on Sunday, you give your money, you go to Bible study, you, depending on which way the denomination goes, you pray the prayer, or you volunteer, or you put in your time on missions. You follow all the steps, and that's how you get noticed in the church, elevated to the place where you could become an elder or a deacon, depending on the church. Maybe if you're a female, you can get in there too. And this is how you enter into the friendships of the influential people within the church who run things. This is not isolated to a church here and there, or, with some crazy pastor. This is a pattern that they have successfully created to help condition people to think in these levels of Freemasonry. And I was raised in this and taught to observe this and to fulfill these levels as I'm growing up as a child and having this drilled into my head that this is what it means to follow Jesus and to be a good Christian. Flip side of that, I'm growing up in a home where I'm being taught all this stuff, and my dad is beating up my dad Jeff, my fake dad Jeff is beating my fake brother Matthew. As a little kid, he would do something, the demons would just absolutely flare up in Jeff, and he would beat the crap out of this kid with belt buckles. And the demons would come out of him and just scream rage. And you never knew what was going to happen, and everything was always unstable. I just remember, because I was spiritually aware as a kid, and I would see darkness. And I realize now what I was seeing was the spiritual world in the physical interacting in my home. And it's because we were literally owned by the demons of Freemasonry. They were invited to live in there and just cause crazy stuff to happen. And so there seems to have been this is also very key, and this is what led me eventually to start questioning the story that I was told. So there seems to have been some kind of hiccup in Linda's life where she messed up on something, and she was trying to gain favor back into her handler's goodwill. And so she's always like completely guilt-ridden and controlled by spirits of doubt and grief and like self-loathing. And she would offload all of that into me. And she, to this day, I don't really know how they did it, but they managed to program me with all of their stuff. So like Jeff's demons, I got that. I also got like a lot of his family trauma. I also got, because he was part Cree, so there's a lot of indigenous trauma that came from that. And then from Linda, I got a pile of stuff. I got like all the McNee trauma put into me. I don't know how they can do this, but they have a way to overlay it on top of my own actual generational trauma. And this was done by telling me all of the stories of their family in gruesome detail. And I'm like a little kid, like who talks to their children like this? But that's what they did. And we would go to these family reunions where there was just utter chaos and manipulation and infighting and hatred, and people would just do horrific things to each other all the time. And this is what I grew up around. And so that's another level of trauma that they would layer on as being normal. But Linda's family was also calling themselves Christians. And so as I said earlier, they're all super soldiers. And they are also infiltrated in the church. You look at them today, they're all millionaires. They're all very well known in their communities or their careers or whatever, wherever it is that they're placed. They, just like me, they all can work like dogs and they're not tired. Like they just don't stop. Very, very smart. Some of them have connections to the royal family. Some of them are in the military. They have reach. And they're also very deep into the same theology that I'm being taught and programmed, and they're like backing it up. And you know, you're a kid, right? So sometimes you don't do things right. And if you're at a family function, well, you got preached to about how you're going to hell, you reprobate, like you better smarten up, listen to your parents. Like this is how it was top down religious control. So you can imagine, like, as a kid, I was just very confused all the time. Just
Well, yeah, because they're, carting you off to the rituals and
yeah.
abusing you horribly, and then the religious programming is getting piled on. And I mean, if there's one thing, because you brought up so many terms as we're going through this, and this is interesting, right? Because, like, so for me, I've had to get this far in the ministry, like Brad Ministries, right? Like, I had to start off by sorting out a lot of the foundation. Like, people have no idea how much foundation work I had to do. Like, literally taking all of the theological arguments and like working through them. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people don't know this. I was in a closet like 8 hours a day for like 3 years, settling like stuff on that level just to get ready for what God was, you know, going to do. And, then trying to turn around and explain to people how you can collapse realms and timelines, like with the powers,
Yes.
we're not even, but as you're talking through it, I'm like, yeah, no, I know that. I've heard that. I've heard this. I've heard that. And that, yes, this holds this kind of bondage in place. And this idea, it actually is anchored to this. It's interesting though. And I mean, my personal thing is, you have your experience, right? And there's no way that I'm going to disqualify that. And so you've seen these people, they programmed you with them. It's just, to me, it's incredible that the religious programming was built into the pre-implantation component of the story. And it's like, all right, that pre-exposure, that's very deep,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it makes you wonder, and because sometimes I look at it, like me personally, and I was like, why would people opt in for a version of Christianity that is devoid of power? It's all white knuckle, it's all guilt, it's shame,
Mm-hmm.
it's and it's like, no, but that's what we're going to cling to. And you people that have freedom, that worship God freely, that speak in tongues, have miracle signs and wonders, like, you're the ones with the demons. The funny thing is, some of them are the ones with the demons. So then I ran into the demons in the Christian mystic movement. I ran into the demons in the charismatic movement and the Kundalini infiltration. I'm like, well, let me not derail our conversation on my personal frustrations here, but I'm tracking with you. And one of the things that is absolutely true, right? When I found out the statistic that the Southern Baptist Convention had, I think, I mean, back in the 2010s, it was like 40,000 free Masonic pastors in the denomination. And it's like, of course, they're using that denomination for a subversive agenda, whether or not everybody that's involved has any idea at the surface that that's what's happening.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate what you're bringing out. Please continue.
Yeah. So I bring all that out on the religious side just to help jar some folks that might need some freedom from that, and to encourage you to go and do your own homework and really
Oof.
study the word of God. Please do the actual word of God.
Thank you.
And Dan has really great stuff that just blows the top off this. There's also several other really awesome scholars out there. You can still get their stuff, hasn't been taken down yet. But ask Jesus to show you the truth. He said, if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed.
Wow.
And that is, he is the way, the truth, and the life. And all who come to the Father through him will find that. So yes, this is very convoluted and crazy, and it can seem like you'll never make it through. Ask Jesus to reveal himself to you. He will.
So they were using this. Now, I still need to come back to the time travel, but before we
Yeah.
get there, the Jewish bloodline.
Yes. So now we're getting there. So, so essentially what was done, which I've just been putting together in the last little while, but there is a very deep connection between um, our bloodlines and our family heritage and what God's original intent for our family lines, whether Jew or Gentile, was back in when he created this and thought it up and did the artwork of what it would be to be a son of God in the earth and all of these realms and everything. And he hasn't changed that. Satan has tried to derail it, steal it, get rid of it, use it for himself, whatever. But that he can't change what God has done. And when we're talking about inheriting the earth and how we were created to have dominion here, we also have to take that knowledge and apply it to how we understand our programming, our actual physical geolocation on this planet. None of these things are by accident. And this is something that I've really started to see the bigger picture on, like in a way that I didn't even think of before. So this is going to play into a lot of your work around liberating territories and land and mandates. It's all connected. So this is how this goes. So I'm just, and I got to read a few of my notes here because this is really going to explain how I figured out the tribe that I belong to, and then how this attaches to literally where I live right now today.
Yeah.
So, I just need to quickly find this. Just a minute. Okay, yes. So this is a little bit of the time travel and a little bit of bloodline all together. So I went, and this, you hadn't released this prayer yet, so I was just tracking to your podcast where you did your deliverance in South Africa, and I felt the Holy Spirit saying, yeah, you can pray along with this. So I did, and I was just praying for the land, like that where my family lives, just that small area. I hadn't expanded out to anything else. I was just like terrified. I was like, oh my gosh, she's letting me pray for like where my house is. Okay. So he released a whole bunch of Nephilim and massive stone walls. He blew a bunch of stuff up, burned it all down in the spirit, sent it into this vortex of judgment. And then he told me to lay down, put my hands on my heart. And then he said, I'm going to show you a terrible thing, but I will help you. So, and this is, again, like how gentle Jesus is. He doesn't do anything outside of what we're ready for. So I saw train tracks and then an old train hauling cattle cars. I knew it was people going to concentration camps. And he showed me a flag with marking on the side of the train. It was white on the top, red, and then black. So in a layer. All of this is very symbolic. And he showed me that there was a golden crest with a dragon in the center, a lion on the left, and a unicorn on the right. This was representing my 3 bloodlines. And then he told me, so my relatives, my Jewish relatives, were on the train. This is before I figured out what tribe I belong to. But this was just me going, okay, like you told me my mom was Jewish, but okay, now what? So he showed me the stars they were wearing, the Jewish star, and they were unloaded at Treblinka. And then I saw the massive clouds of black smoke from the furnaces. And then he pivoted and he showed me the young Queen Elizabeth, and he said she was complicit in the camps. The reptilians needed to sacrifice the blood to bring in the entities of the world to build the final phase before the Antichrist. Well, I think a lot of other people have spoken to this. But they will do it again before he comes in order to call in the rest of the beast system. But the sacrifice will be larger, biggest one yet. And then I was like super confused by this point. I said, I don't have any Jewish ancestors, because what I was programmed to believe from Linda's story, my fake mom, is that I was of Ukrainian descent.
Mm.
And then on Jeff's side, that I was part German and part Cree Indian. So that's what I've believed my entire life, that I'm from that area. And this is, again, going back to, you're asking about, like, do I look similar to the family? Yeah, they did a pretty good job with that. And then also, they did a really good job with getting the ethnicity and that genealogical story very close, but not quite. So Jesus is showing me this. I'm like, I'm not Jewish. Like, what? and he straight up said it. He shows me the Star of David, his star, hanging above my head. They're just beautiful. They're golden. They're just absolutely lovely. And I see these old Jews reading the Torah. He translates me to Latvia, and I see the Jewish community there before the war, before all of the killing and everything, and they're seeking him and living according to the rabbinic law. And some of them are actually like true believers, some of them are caught up in Kabbalah, but they're there. That's where my roots are from. And he said, these are my Latvian Jewish ancestors before the Germans killed them all. And I'm like, I'm not Jewish. And he says in this very quiet, still voice, yes, you are. And I was just like, okay, I can't argue with you. So then from there, he took me a little bit further. And fast forwarding to my late teens, early 20s, and back into the First Baptist Church that I was attending. So there was this family, they're known as the Careys around here. They're all like, everyone loves them. They're, very wealthy farmers, and they're very well known in the church. They've been there forever. They planted the church, and, they run the financials at the church, and they're always on the deacon and elder boards, and everybody knows who they are. So I was supposed to marry one of the kids, and Jeff and Linda would have allowed it. However, and I never understood like why this happened, because everything seemed to be aligned really well. But God showed me that he actually intervened in that marriage to make sure that it never happened, that there was some kind of fight and I got caught in the middle of it. And then our two families like split ways. And because at that time I was having like an internal breakdown where I could no longer reconcile what I had been taught with what was happening at home. And I was just like, God, like, if you're there, like, you've got to get me out of here. Just do something. Like, I don't know what to do anymore with my life. So what he made clear to me is he actually heard that prayer and he honored it. Because I was about to be used for several purposes. One of them was as a breeder for their Freemason line. And then he showed me this. So ironically, there where they live is set on a part of a ley line that runs in our province that is very large. And it's intersected by another ley line that is not as large, but still very significant.
Wow.
And I have spent most of my life living in this area. I've never really seemed to be able to get away from it, even though I did for a time live in northern Alberta and did for a time live in Calgary when I was younger, but always seemed to like stay in this general area where these ley lines are. Now, where I am today, it's like he set us on a teeter-totter of these ley lines. So where they are and where I am is positioned to balance or to be able to go at loggerheads. And this is connected to what God had intended for me and my bloodline from eternity past. So, and this is what Satan was trying to steal. So it turns out that where I am, I not only have the territorial mandate for like my home, but I also have it for this. There's literally an area, it's a massive area around me that includes this town where these guys are.
Look.
And they were controlling it. So this is what was sitting over it.
Mm-hmm.
They had lines running to Easter Island, Stonehenge, Vatican, Notre Dame, Antarctica, Arctic, Cape Horn, South Africa, and Hawaii. And there was a massive Kabbalah tree planted over this territory where all of this stuff has been happening to me my entire life. There was a huge portal right above this territory. And there was a massive dark hooded and cloaked entity sitting above it. It was a fallen angel, and Jesus said it was the angel of death, literally parked above us. I'm like, oh, that would explain why I felt like suiciding my entire life. And why I've had the lifeblood like drained out of me all this time. No kidding. and then as he's showing me this entity, he's like, yeah, and it wants you dead too. Okay, well, nothing new. I've had many things come at me in the recent years trying to take me out. So here was another one. And so there's this black stone portal / altar with pentagram etched into the center of the territory. And then he just laid out all these words: energy, force field, Masonic temple, SRA, sale of children and aborted fetus, wickedness, debauchery, Gaia, Jezebel, Knights Templar, Druids, Ojibwe, Cree, Kainai, Scottish Rite, and Shriners, worship of money. And this is where he revealed the tunnel system that I mentioned earlier that brought me here.
Mm-hmm.
That tunnel system also leads into Hollow Earth.
Mm.
And there are witches using the energy on the ley lines that are in this place.
Of course.
Of course.
Of course.
and they had taken all of this from me, and they were using it for their evil works and purposes, and drawing on my energy and my abilities and my created being to do all of this wickedness and all of the programming. Like, that's what it was being used for, plus other things, but in a huge way. So we prayed over this territory and liberated it. And after it was liberated and washed and cleaned out and just utterly blessed in the name of Jesus, he gave me this word, Asher. And I wasn't really sharp in the moment, because I had just gone through all of this revelation of what was happening with the territory and me and all this stuff. And I was like, Asher, oh, sounds like another Egyptian god I'm probably linked to that I need to get out. Woohoo. So I looked it up the next day, and I literally Googled gods named Asher.
Mm.
And this is what comes up in the Google search. Asher, a tribe of Israel, means happy and blessed.
Yeah. I didn't want to mess up the punchline, but I was like, yep, that is one of the tribes. So that's where you connected. So you are actually drawing on the lost tribe of Asher.
Yeah.
As a heritage. Wow.
Yeah. And so I just like clicked into that. And of course, there's a Kabbalah tree listing with Libra as the zodiac sign for Asher. I was like, oh, how convenient that I am the surrogate of a birth date that fits right in Libra's constellation of September to October. Oh. And God just told me again, he's like, you are Jewish. Asher is your tribe. And I'm just like, I'm going to just fall right over right now. So that was a massive revelation into my true identity, what they've been trying to steal from me, use me for, why they were programming me so hard. And funny enough, I was raised to believe that Jews were like the junk of the earth, and that they had spit on God's promise, and so too bad for them. Like, it's all about the Gentiles now. And like, I had this like drilled into my head growing up. Only to find out that's
yeah, I get that. There's this thing, and I am still wrestling through it, because when you read the book of Revelation, there are 144,000 of the tribes of Israel. It says that. You can't make it say anything else. There's no like alternate interpretation. It's like, no, there are 12 tribes, and the 12 tribes are nowhere to be found. Even now, it's like, well, where are they? In the nations. They are the nations of the earth. Like the weaving of the 12 tribes, or at least the 9.5 tribes that were lost, are the nations. And then so it's really interesting. There is this stream of mystery as we approach the end times, and it's woven into the deep part of the Cabal agenda. Like, they know their angle on it. I don't know yet. I'm still working it out. This is another data point for me, but wow, so interesting. And it's tied to land.
Yeah.
I have a lot to say on land redemption.
Nice.
But I am not going to say here. What I am going to say is we have a whole lot of other stuff to talk about, because we didn't even touch the time travel. And that was the other part of the cliffhanger. So here's what's going to happen. I think we're going to have to do a part 3 just to literally consolidate that conversation in one place, which means it looks like I'm going to have you back.
Uh-oh.
Valerie knew this would happen. Wow. Well, Kate, you just are just a real joy to talk to, and there are a lot of other things. You being a connection of old Babel to future Babel, like that's another theme that I'm just like, hello. We do have a few more things to talk about. So I will make you all that are listening to this podcast wait at least a little bit. But Kate will be back. We're going to finish this conversation somehow, some way. So until next time, God bless and Godspeed. You've been listening to Discovering Truth with Dan Duvall. Visit me at danduvall.com, where you will discover merch, books, and the opportunity to engage in our private social network. Join the tribe by subscribing to our email list and supporting this podcast.